Hi everybody. So I'm back with another installment of the I Ching comparison between our friends, the Wisdom Keepers, the Tao Oracle, Gene Keys, Richard Rudd. So again, apologies for completely abandoning this project. It's interesting that I got stuck in the Standstill card. What do you think of that one? That's pretty incredible, huh? Yeah, and like I said in my last video, what happened really was my computer was taken hostage, so I didn't really feel like I should shoot this on my phone. And yeah, as you can see, I'm stuck in Standstill. This was of the, I think I've done 2 or 3 already. This was definitely the hardest one. It was the hardest one to understand so far. It was the hardest one to distill to something I can communicate in a video. So I'm going to do my best, but remember, I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm just sort of translating to you what I've gotten out of the juxtaposition of the 3 disciplines. And if you see a tail, that's PT. PT, you want to make an appearance? That's easy peasy, or PT in Hebrew. And she's a kid and she's going to make a lot of noise in the background, I'm sure. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what the actual I Ching meaning here is. So you can see the little circle and the little square, right? So the circle is the masculine principle, the square is the feminine principle. Again, for me, like I said in previous videos, that seems a little backwards, but sure, we'll go with it. On the other side, you see the 3 lines of the masculine principle and the broken lines for the feminine principle. And in some literature, they refer to it as heaven over earth. So heaven is associated with the masculine principle and earth is with the feminine principle. That makes perfect sense. What confused me, and what I think part of my standstill in this whole process, was that both the Wisdom Keepers and the Gene Keys take, obviously they both refer to it as the 12 hexagram, but there's a very clear departure from the original meaning, which is standstill or impasse in the traditional I Ching, and then therefore also in the Tao Oracle, and where the Wisdom Keepers and the I Ching, where the Wisdom Keepers and the Gene Keys took it. And so I'm going to try and be very clear here. The meaning of this card is standstill. In I Ching, it's also standstill or impasse, as clearly depicted in the image in this card, right? For the Wisdom Keepers and the Gene Keys, the 3 levels of this card are: the shadow is vanity, the gift is discrimination, and the gift is purity. Sorry, the CD is purity. So again, so the shadow is vanity, the gift is discrimination, and the CD, the highest level, is purity. And it took me a long time to understand how the heck did we get from this to this. If I miss something, if I'm not aware, and if maybe I'm missing something, so please leave it in the comments. I would love to learn. But my explanation of it at the end was something like the following. I think at the bottom of this hexagram is me as masculine meeting the feminine and acknowledging that I'm different from it. Earth looking at heaven, acknowledging that it's different from it. And at the same time, the feminine and the masculine make totality. Heaven and earth make a totality. So it's a part of the whole, recognizing its own uniqueness and then juxtaposing it with a totality. Now, there are different levels in that, obviously. So vanity would be, I acknowledge that I'm me and therefore I'm unique and I'm not like you and you are not me. Then in the level of discrimination, we say, in the level of vanity, I'm making a judgment call by saying I'm better than you. In the level of discrimination, my screen just shut down. In the level of discrimination, I just acknowledge the fact that I'm different than you. And the level of purity, it would be, hold on, maybe I'm different from you, but together we make a totality. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll repeat it later as we go through these different elements and reiterate. But I think that that's where the idea of standstill, where one side meets its opposite or something that is different from it, and it's sort of stopped by the differences, if that made sense. And sorry, let's focus. And this idea where at the root of it is the idea of discrimination, where I acknowledge the fact that I'm me and those outside of that issue, that principle, are different. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So let me actually start with the Tao Oracle. And I'm not going to go into a lot of depth, just because I really think that the other ones were easier to explain. For me, somehow, this hexagram is much more difficult. The idea expressed in this card is of a snowstorm and the futility of trying to shovel snow when there's a blizzard going on. At some point, we need to say, okay, let's stop. Let's not move forward. Let's accept the fact that there's an impasse. Take the time for reflection, go inward, study the situation, wait for a better opportunity. That's basically it. Then the 6 lines each represent a stage in that impasse. So the first one, don't move, don't do anything. The second one, be careful of other people doing things. 3, just for God's sake, be patient. 4, ooh, maybe there's an opening. 5, there is an opening. 6, move, the impasse is over. But at the end of the day, it's really an impasse, and it sort of feels like what I was experiencing this summer with the computer. There was a serious impasse with wonderful Lenovo who just did not want to give me back my computer. So this is why we're trying to get this video done. So I'm moving out of the standstill. But that's very, very simple. You get this card, just go inwards, understand what the situation is, and wait for a better opportunity, wait for a better moment. So that's, whoa, focus, yeah. So that's this card. As was the case with the other videos, the Wisdom Keepers sort of present a simpler way of understanding the gene key principles behind the hexagram. I have a guest. And the story behind this guy is also, again, very, very simple. He was acknowledged as a wise soul. He works on his evolution as a guide, as a mentor, and as he's evolving, he finally realizes that the more he's evolving, the more he is aware of how different he is and how much better he is from other people. So all of his spiritual evolution has really led to one place, which is ego, vanity, and judgment. And it's only through realizing that she actually said it really beautifully, that vanity is owning our uniqueness, which I totally agree, totally support. And interestingly enough, Richard Rudd, in the more deeper understanding, it actually doesn't quite say that in those words. So in a way, I like this description much better. So yeah, the principle behind this is very simple. When we acknowledge ourselves, acknowledge our uniqueness, we tend to compare that uniqueness to other people's uniqueness, and is that better or worse? And I guess that's up to people to decide for themselves. And I will touch on the conundrum that is the result of this realization in a second. Okay, so that's the story behind this guy. Again, very, very simple. The more I evolve, the more I climb the levels of evolution, the better I become. And if I'm better, then I'm better than everybody else. Then vanity creeps his head, and obviously that's very simple to understand. In the book, in the Gene Keys, and I want to actually tell you all that I found this on Audible. There is a lovely lady who is actually reading this massive volume. And it was easy to me to listen to it first before I just delve into the text. Again, it's very, very dense. And so after several listeners, I think I have an understanding of what Rudd is trying to say here. So let me try and impart some of that knowledge, and I will read more than usual just so you guys get a feeling for it. So obviously, like I stated before, the shadow is vanity. And vanity is asserting one ego over somebody else's is better and more worthy. The thing I want to read here, which I thought was really beautiful, it is not what you say that matters, but the frequency that lies behind your voice. Vanity can choose the most beautiful of words, but it can never hide the frequency of its tone. And I think that's really, really beautiful. We might say things, but if we don't really mean them, the true intention will always come through. Another beautiful quote: vanity does, however, have an arch enemy, which is love. Vanity keeps you from truly loving another because it keeps you isolated. And that, again, relates to what I said earlier, that there's first the understanding of I'm me and another person is different than me. But if love is present, then I can, as much as I love myself, I can love the other person as well. If love is not present, then it just becomes which one of us is better. And I think that's what he's talking about here. Then he divides the shadow into two levels. There is the repressive nature, which is elitism, according to him. So if I'm smarter than you, obviously, then I'm elitist. And the malicious side, which was very interesting, it's when you can hurt other people just by the power of your word. How do I relate to this? I think that as a musician, we are constantly battling this issue of somebody else can play the same piece better. Am I playing this piece better than anybody else? Is there value to my interpretation of the piece? Is there no value? Am I meaningless in the process? Am I everything in the process? So I really got stuck on this because I think that we all have issues with vanity, asserting our own ego as opposed to other people. And maybe this is a good place to talk about the conundrum, because you know what, I'm going to wait with the conundrum. Let's wait. The second level, the gift, which is discrimination, and this is really beautiful how he states it. He says, am I looking in the right place? Yeah, I think so. The energy of vanity is simply self-destructive unless it can be put to good use. Discrimination is exactly that. You take your vanity, the urge to be better or somehow purer than others, and you turn it into art. So again, like in some of the other ones we've seen, the gift usually is associated with something artistic. So what does he mean by that? He means that when we take the ability to discriminate, to say, I'm me, you're you, and we take it into a domain, let's say music, then I can now say, well, I can see the distinction in how I'm performing a certain phrase or how I'm approaching a certain issue in music or a certain passage as different from somebody else's. So that ability to discriminate and say I'm doing something different is of value. It's not of value when I'm just using it to say, well, mine is better than somebody else's, but is of extreme value when I say, that's my way of understanding this passage. What's yours? So I thought that was really, really beautiful. Yeah, and again, there's so much here that I think it would be unfair to try and condense it into a couple of sentences. Go buy the book and read it. It's terrific. And then the highest level, the purity, I'm going to read what he says about that. With vanity, your lower self falls in love with itself. And with purity, the higher self falls in love with itself. You might say that purity is when the divine falls in love with you. And this can only happen when you come within the sphere of divine love. Your behavior, your thoughts, your feelings, the very air you breathe must resonate to one purpose. What the Sufis call falling in love with the beloved. The beloved is not something out there. It is the essence of your true nature. And you do fall into it because it resides deep within you. So this is, I think the beautiful example he gives is of children. Children don't necessarily know that they're separate from other things. And so they connect to the world around them with joy and with laughter and with happiness. I think as we mature, we lose that innocence, that joy, that purity. and we start isolating ourselves from the totality around us. Yeah, so that's just a glimpse into a very, very deep and sort of complex hexagram. And so now I'm going to talk about the conundrum. The conundrum, as I see it, is we all need ego, our uniqueness, to understand ourselves. So to judge the ego and its need for comparison, I think, is a little dangerous. And again, in the Wisdom Keepers, she says it beautifully. Vanity is owning our uniqueness. So it's not a negative thing. It's just a thing that happens for us to be able to understand who we are as opposed to everybody else. So the conundrum is, and I'm going to go kind of deep here. If the purpose of life is for spirit to understand itself through us, through separate consciousness, then the point is to move as far away from that consciousness, is to expand on it as much as possible, for us to be unique, for us to sort of own our vanity as much as we can as separate entities. If the object is to go back to spirit, to lose our separateness and to immerse ourselves in the divine, then that uniqueness is meaningless. Like, what's the point? Let's just all surrender our egos and go and merge with spirit and be happy ever after. So it really depends on your view of the world, of what you see is the purpose of life. Is it to express your uniqueness, or is it to merge with the divine? Which direction are we moving in? Maybe both at the same time. It really depends on your position. But I guess that's the standstill in all of this, is like, which direction are we moving? Are we moving to express our uniqueness and hence our vanity, or we're moving to surrender our vanity, surrender our uniqueness, and merge with spirit to understand we are all actually just these little particles of a much, much, much bigger whole and totality. Okay, so hopefully that was interesting and articulate, and you understood something of what the things that I understood here. I'm sorry if it wasn't. I just need to move on beyond the impasse and beyond this card. So I hope that the next one is going to be a little simpler and easier to understand. And until that time, adios.